What's up, my friend? Welcome to the Finding Direction podcast. My name is Stu Massengill, and I'm here every single week to bring you a passionate guest or message dedicated to helping you find your purpose so that you can live a life full of passion, fulfillment, and happiness. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for hanging out with me, and let's dive in. What's up, my friend? Welcome to the final episode here on the Finding Direction podcast. I want to say truly, from the deepest place in my heart to your heart, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. This is our 400th episode on the show, and it's going to be our last episode on the show as well. So thank you so much for being here. And as we dive through our episode today, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, talking about some of the nostalgic moments we've had on the show, talking about the reason that we're going to be ending this show. We're going to be talking about some of the favorite episodes that we've had on this show, and so many other things that I promise you, if you stick around with us today, are going to be tremendously valuable for you in your life. And if you're even looking to start a podcast, towards the end of this, I'm going to give you some tips on kind of, things I wish I knew when I started my podcast journey that I promise will be helpful if you're looking to do the same. And so, first and foremost, as we officially dive into today's episode, I want to say thank you. Thank you, whether you, when I first had the idea of this podcast, said, yes, Stu, you should do that. And you supported me in those early days, right? When we launched our first handful of episodes, if you were someone who, we're like, hey, I'm going to download and I'm going to listen to that show that Stu launched. And you didn't have any idea whether it was going to be good or not, or what it was going to look like. But you may have downloaded one of those first ones when we kicked this thing off. And if you did, man, I want to say thank you from my heart to yours for supporting us as we initially kicked off this show. And if you're someone who, somewhere over the last 4.5 years, whether you stumbled across this show because we connected through some other endeavor that we had, whether you are a close family or friend who's, followed us and you saw, maybe a few years ago, you go, oh, Stu has this podcast, or whether you heard about us through a friend or you found us on, Spotify or iTunes, however you came across us, whenever you came across us, I want to say thank you again from the deepest place of my heart for joining us on this show. I truly mean it when I say it, but it is such a deep gift to have any amount of anybody's time, right? Time is something we'll never get back in our life. And if you've spent all of, 5 minutes with me on this podcast, or you've spent, over the last couple of years, maybe hundreds of minutes and maybe even hours with me throughout the duration of this show, I want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your commitment to yourself, to wanting to grow, to wanting to become a better version of yourself. And thank you for allowing me to be someone that is helping you or has helped you through that journey. I truly honor it, and it is one of the greatest gifts that I have in my life is to be able to pour into other people. So thank you so much. And, as we look back on the last 4.5 years of this show, there are so many incredible moments we've had. There's some awful moments that we've had. There's so much up and down throughout the 4.5 years that we've been doing this show, and probably the 5 years ago was really the inception of this show. And to kind of reflect on some of the past, when we started this show, I remember I was sitting at Vans. I was working at the company Vans, and I was sitting in the office with one of my coworkers. His name was Gabriel. Gabriel, if you're listening to this, shout out to you. And I was talking to him about, how I wanted to find a way to add value to people, to make a difference, to, bring value to the world and other people in this way of helping people live a better quality of life. And I was talking to him about, how I wanted to start throwing events and doing speaking things. And he threw the idea by me and he goes, Stu, why don't you start like a YouTube channel or something? And you could, rather than having to have like a big event to share this with people, you could do it through like a YouTube channel. And after we had that conversation, the seed was planted in my brain to find a way to maybe start a YouTube channel. And eventually the idea came of, hey, maybe I could start a podcast where I could add value to people's lives. And when I first got the idea, I am, as you've probably found out on the show, the biggest believer that execution is the name of the game. You want to change your life, you got to take action. You can't sit there and think about, man, I want to change my life and my finances and my career. It's like, you really want to change it, think about it a little bit, but then take action. And so after Gabe and I had this conversation, probably a month later, I had ordered podcast equipment. I had started to ideate names for the show. I didn't quite have the name of the show. And I had already started messaging people to come on the show, right, that I was thinking about. And so when we started it, it was not, hey, like we didn't even have the name when we started it. It was not, this is what it's going to look like over the next couple of years. It wasn't that, like, it was such a rough idea, but one of the biggest reflections I have as I look back 4.5 years ago, 5 years ago when we started this podcast is we started with action, right? It was a moment of saying, this is an idea, let me do something about it. And it's so crazy to me that if I never, bought that first microphone, I bought an ATR 2100. It was like a $70 mic. And I bought two of them because back then we did a lot more in person. But I bought two of them. I bought this little recorder we had at the time because, again, we did a lot more in person. And I think maybe 5 weeks later was sitting down with the vice president of Vans, the company, and the person whose father actually started Vans, recording. And you can go back and listen to that episode. It's with Steve Van Dorn. It's one of our very first episodes. But that was such an interesting, sort of reflection I look on where if I always thought about, well, what's the name and what's the structure and how are we going to get guests and how are we going to edit it and like all those sort of technical questions that eventually are important, then we may have never got 400 episodes into the show, let alone one episode into the show. And as we went through the journey, when we first started the show, my biggest sort of idea was I want to start this in a way that's not overwhelming. So when we started the show, if you go back, you'll sort of see the cadence of this, but we did one guest episode every other week. And then the other 2 weeks of the month were something we called the action after. If you remember those episodes where we would take one question the guest answered, their last question, still the last question we ask on an episode every day with the guest. And we would expand upon that. And for me, when I started, it was like, this is the cadence. And I think, if you have an interest in starting a podcast, a big important thing is what's a cadence that's comfortable for you. And after about a year and a half of doing the show, we took it to a point where we said, okay, let's do one guest episode a week and one action after a week. And that was manageable. That was doable. And then in the last 100 episodes we've done, 300 to 400, we changed kind of the dynamic of the show. And we said, let's do one guest episode a week and one solo episode a week where it's just me and you having a conversation about how you can improve the quality of your life. And those were kind of the progression of the show. And I think back to, it's like you try something and you push forward on something you want to do, you're going to have messy moments. And one of the messy moments I remember in particular, this is when we had an intern who was helping us find guests on the show. It was one of the ways we were able to help someone find us guests and do it in a way that was actually free. And we had this one person that came on the show, and you'll never actually hear this episode because it no longer exists. But we had a guest come on the show, and I kid you not, I don't even remember their name, but they get on the show, and all of a sudden they pick up on the phone, right? Like usually you get on with someone when you're doing it virtually, and they're on their computer, you're on your computer, they're in their house, you're in your house or your studio. And this person picks up on their phone, and they're walking through a convenience store looking at me going, Stu, one sec, I'm about to buy this sandwich. And they buy the sandwich, and I'm sitting there going, what the hell is going on? And they walk out, they light up a cigarette, and they go, okay, let's record this. Let's do this. What are we doing? And I'm just sitting there going, what the hell is going on? And throughout the episode, because we did actually record it, we didn't release it, but throughout the entire recording, they had a garbage truck behind them that was backing up, and that sort of beeping reverse sound that goes off when a truck goes in reverse was playing through the entire episode, right? And that's one of those moments that I will never forget on the show, Because again, you figure it out as you go. And this was one of those moments where we go, okay, this is something we're never doing again, right? We got to go back to the drawing board when it comes to who are we getting on the show? What's that process look like? What's the trainings we're doing with our interns? And that was a crazy, crazy, crazy part of it. And I think, as we have gone through this, two of my favorite parts of having this podcast, or I guess three, one would be pouring into people like yourself that are hanging out with me today, right? To get to pour into your life, your soul, help you increase the quality of your life. And the two really other just amazing parts of this podcast that I've so enjoyed is one being the incredible ability to connect with amazing human beings. There is something that is so cool that when you have a podcast and you ask someone, hey, you want to share your story? There's people that normally you can't have conversations with, but because you have a podcast and everybody wants to talk about themselves, now you can kind of have this conversation with someone that you may have not had access to before. And so it's been such an incredible way to meet some amazing people. I've met some tremendous friends now in my life, tremendous people that I've collaborated with in business, and some people that, some we've just kind of passed on in life and continue to interact here and there. And I think the third and last piece that's been such a joy on this show is the ability, unlike any other setting in life, that you are now, because someone's on your podcast, on your show, you have this incredible ability to dive into any aspect of someone's life. Like when someone comes on the show, there's this unbelievable aspect of, like, you are granted full permission to really dive into their life and understand who are they and how did they, become the person that they are, and what are the trials that they went through, and what are the, challenges they've overcome. It's such an unbelievable gift to be able to have someone come on this show. And man, this has been such a joy through all the episodes we've had where, you get a moment to really dive into any aspect of someone's life. And I've found that to be very, very rare in other situations. You're not going to walk into a coffee shop, meet someone, and have these conversations, right? But when you come on the podcast, it's this incredible opportunity to dive into so many aspects of people's lives, right? So, what I want to go through next with you is, as we've gone throughout the last 400 episodes, there's always a few episodes that stand out, right? There's always a few that you go, man, that was unbelievable. That was so much fun and so much value. And so there's, about 4 episodes in specific that have been some of my favorite episodes on this show that I want to share with you. Just in case, one, you've never listened to them, I'd highly encourage you to go check these ones out if you haven't listened to them. And even if you have, I'd encourage you to go back to them. And the first one I want to share with you was with one of our guests, Michael Marks. And he is the VP of the company Nixon, right? The watch company. And the episode title, it's episode 7 on this show, you'll go way back to the beginning, was called A Conversation with a Psychic. And I won't spoil the whole thing for you, but, as the title talks about, and with Michael being the vice president of Nixon, obviously you can see that this conversation with the sidekick turned out pretty well. So it was a really, really fun episode to do. We actually did it at Nixon headquarters. So we went and hung out there for a little bit. It was really, really fun. And then the next episode of mine that was one of the favorites was having Rob Dyrdek on, right? Rob Dyrdek, if you don't know him, is, an icon. He's someone that you watch the show Ridiculousness. If you ever watched Robin Big back in the day, he's someone that I kind of grew up watching on these different shows, The Fantasy Factory. And so eventually we were able to get him on the show. And man, this guy's mind is mind-boggling, right? Like the supercomputer that he has in his head is truly something like I've never seen before. And so we had the opportunity to dive into that. That was episode 365, and it was called Living Your Best Life, Creating Clarity, and Optimizing for Happiness. Right, truly, truly an awesome episode. And the next favorite episode I had on this show was with Seth Godin. And Seth Godin, he's someone that is an iconic author, a thought leader. He has one of the most noteworthy TED Talks if you look him up on YouTube. And he came to join us on episode 367. And the episode title was called Moving Fear, Finding Meaning, and Spreading Big Ideas. And a few of the ideas that Seth shared on that episode, and you can go listen to it, but I'll just give you a few nuggets that have really stuck with me from that day, is a few things that he said. Is one thing he said, humans, they aren't a resource, but humans are the point, right? And that as you go throughout life, really simply, you just want to do something that matters, that you love, where people will miss you when you're gone. And I think this was such a simplified way to really dive into finding your purpose in life, right? Oftentimes we can overcomplicate it and, make it kind of this messy thing, but Seth really boiled it down in a beautiful way. So highly, highly encourage you to go check that episode out. Again, it's episode 367. And then finally, one of the other episodes that was one of my favorite was Mikey Taylor, who came on the show. He used to be a pro skateboarder. Now he is, an entrepreneur that is wildly successful. And on this episode, it was episode 63. And Mikey was a pro skateboarder. He started the company St. Archer Brewing. And the episode itself is called Pro Skateboarder, St. Archer Brewing, and Early Investing. And I remember specifically this episode because when we had Mikey on the show, this was one of the times when we actually got our first intern on the show to help with booking guests. And I remember, looking at my calendar for the week, and I saw on there Mikey Taylor. And growing up as someone who was a skateboarder, an action sports enthusiast, and always followed those things, I knew who Mikey Taylor was. And so, throughout the week and kind of the weeks before, I did my research, all these different things. And I remember, as we were getting ready to start the podcast, and as I was waiting for Mikey to jump on the show, there was something in the back of my head that was going, is this really like the pro skateboarder Mikey Taylor? For me, this felt like the biggest guest we had on the show up until this point. And I just remember thinking, is this really the Mikey Taylor that's a skateboarder? Is this some other Mikey Taylor? And I remember when he, jumped on at that moment, we used to do a lot through Zoom. We use a different platform now. But I remember he logged on, and just this sense of awestruck, came over me, where it was holy crap. This is this guy that I've followed, my entire life as a pro skateboarder, and watched him and, aspired to be like him. I, once in the past wanted to be a pro skateboarder, and it was just this beautiful moment on the show. And the episode did not let down. Mikey had this crazy sort of time in his life where he stopped being a pro skateboarder and kind of had to refine his new identity. And he was very meticulous as he went through this process. And when we went into the episode and had that episode, he was actually really tactfully able to articulate kind of what that process was like as he sort of refound his identity, going from being a pro skateboarder to not being a pro skateboarder. And so that was, one of, again, my all-time favorite episodes that we had on the show. That was episode 63. So make sure you go out and check that one out as well. And, a few other things that I want to share with you. Again, today's going a little bit longer than our normal solo episodes, but that's just because, again, this is the last episode we're ever going to have, and just want to spend a little bit extra time with you. But a few other things I want to share is, as we've done this show, there's always a lot that goes on behind the scenes that people don't really see, right? I mean, you guys see that every Tuesday and Thursday, basically for the last 4.5 years, all of a sudden it goes, boom, Finding Direction has a new podcast. Boom, Finding Direction has a new podcast. Tuesday, Thursday, every single week, 2 episodes. It's like all of a sudden they just magically appear. And there is so much that goes on behind the scenes. And I just wanted to kind of share with you a little bit of what that's been like. I mean, when we have the show, to kind of give you A to Z what it looks like is, first when we start the show, after we've sort of created, again, the name, the brand, the sort of theme and idea of what this show wants to be about, and we have things flowing, every episode, there's a massive amount that goes into the show, right? I mean, when we start looking to get an episode together, the first thing we obviously have to do is figure out, okay, who's a guest that could be someone that we believe could add tremendous amount of value to our listener and our community. And so we go through this whole process of, basically a certain criteria that we look for to have a guest on the show. And then once we find those people, then we go through this whole process of reaching out to these people. And if it was as easy as sending one email and having someone get on the show, that'd be amazing. But there is so much that goes into this when it comes to following up, finding creative ways to reach out to people, getting, sort of networking and getting people on the show through that way. And so there's this whole sort of process where, we go through to find someone on the show. And then once we finally get in touch with them and they say, hey, yeah, I'd love to do this, then we go through the process of booking the interview, finding the date, getting them kind of all set up for that. And then once we have that locked down, it goes into the process of research, right? This is one of my favorite parts of what we do on the show is I get to dive into this person's life before I meet them, right? I get to read about them. I get to study it through them online, through other things they've done, and really kind of get an idea of who's this person, what have they gone through in their life, and what are the things that I really want to, get a deeper understanding about, and also that I believe would be valuable to you when you get a deeper understanding of why they did sort of what they did. And so they come on the show. We record the podcast, right? There's kind of a process we do for that as well, where we structure a few questions, but then we really, kind of when the show happens, we really just let curiosity take over. I'm a big believer that you want to have quality conversations. You got to follow kind of that intuition, that sort of just curiosity that shows up when you're in a conversation with somebody on the show. So we do that. And then after, we have a whole post-production process that happens. And I'm going to, acknowledge a few people on this show that have helped us tremendously. Because, when it comes to post-production, right, I finish recording and then I send this to someone on our team who I'll share with you in just a minute. And he is the master behind our post-production. He takes everything, he edits it, he cleans it up, he publishes it, he turns it into micro content for us so that we can then publish that. And it's a whole process to make sure that once we've now recorded it, well, we want to make sure that people are actually going to see this and listen to this and get more eyeballs and earballs on this show. And so two of the people that I really want to just give a massive, massive acknowledgement to is the first one is one of my biggest teammates who's been on this journey with me for now, I think, the last 2.5 years, roughly, is Jacob. And Jacob, he is our master editor. He is our post-production superstar. And Jacob, I know, you're going to listen to this while you edit this. I just want to say from the deepest place of my heart, Jacob, thank you so much for the blessing that you've been in my life, the blessing that you've been in all of our listeners' lives, like the amount of lives that you have touched, Jacob, because of everything you've done with the post-production and the micro content and all those things has been unbelievable. And it's something that we could not have done without your tremendous input into everything that it takes to put this show together. So Jacob, from my heart to yours, I'll say this 1,000,000 times over. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for everything you have done for this show. It has been a blessing in my life to know you. And so thank you so much, Jacob. I appreciate you, brother. You are truly a one-of-a-kind human being. All right. And one other person I want to thank is a woman named May, who May no longer actually works with us, but she's someone that, worked together with me on this show for probably, close to 2.5, 3 years. And May helped us with a lot of guest outreach at one point, a lot of other aspects of the show to really kind of bring this thing together. And so May, wherever you are, if you're listening to this, I really hope you are. I just want to say thank you so much for being a massive, massive part of this show. All right. And as we start to, sort of wind down this show and wind down this final episode, I want to share with you 2 specific lessons that have been some of the biggest lessons I've learned throughout the entirety of this show. And the first one is, if you've joined us on this show for, again, a day, a week, a month, 5 years, 4.5 years, there's been a theme that I've shared numerous times on the show about a part of my life where I had a story that I always told myself about that I wasn't supposed to share my voice, right? That didn't make sense, or no one cared to listen, or like I always had this internal chatter growing up that nobody wants to hear what you have to say. It doesn't matter. And, it's kind of almost seems backwards as we're wrapping this show up. But one of the biggest lessons that I've achieved and gotten through running this podcast, and one of the biggest lessons that I want to share to you, is to never stop sharing your voice. When I started this show, I had some still parts of that. I was still growing. I had some parts of, is anybody going to want to listen to this? Is anybody going to want to tune in? Am I going to say anything that really matters to people? And, as we've gone throughout the show, as I've been able to interact with so many of you, whether that's through, messages on Instagram or emails or, meeting in person and saying hello, I just want you to understand that if you have ever questioned if sharing your voice matters, if you've ever questioned if sharing your voice can make a difference, I want you to understand that if you've thought about sharing your voice, that means there's a calling on your life to share your voice in some way, shape, or form, whatever that looks like. If there is something inside of you that's saying, I'm supposed to share my voice about this thing or that thing or whatever it is, I want this moment right now to be your sign to say, you know what? I'm going to share my voice. I'm going to start that thing. I'm going to, not be the quiet person that I've always been. I'm going to start talking more about the things that really are important and things that I value. And I believe that if you do that, your voice matters. Like everybody's voice matters. So go out there, share your voice. And if you have that internal chatter that's saying, share my voice doesn't matter, really, you want to understand that that's a belief system you have in your life and that that's not you. You had an experience somewhere in your life that stuck with you, and now you have this sort of internal chatter that says, sharing my voice doesn't matter, right? That's because of an experience you had somewhere in your life and you held on to that. And so what I want you to understand is that belief is not you, right? You may believe that it's you because it's been there for some time, but it's not you. Right. And we have, some episodes on this show that we've shared where you can go and you can look at, how do you really start to change some of those beliefs that you have about yourself? So I would encourage you, go back, check out some of those things, and you're going to start to, really understand that is not you. And it does matter that you share your voice. Right. So if you want to go to the episode specifically I'm mentioning, it's episode 392. And it's called 7 Steps to Change a Belief About Yourself. So if you have that belief that your voice doesn't matter, go check out episode 392, right? 7 Steps to Change a Belief About Yourself. And then the second lesson that I've learned on this show, which really took this whole show to a whole nother level, is the 3 Ds. And I won't go too in-depth into it, but it's do it, defer it, and delegate it, right? If you want to scale, if you want to grow something in your life, ask yourself, what do you specifically need to do? What can you defer? What can you do later that maybe you need to do, but you don't need to do it right now? And then number 3, what can you delegate, right? If you want to scale anything, you have to learn the skill of delegation, right? This is when we brought people like Jacob and May on our show to delegate some of the other parts of the podcast because we knew if we really wanted to scale it, well, we needed a team, right? So understand that, do, defer, and delegate. And then finally, as we wrap this up, I want to share with you the reason that we're ending the podcast, right? Because you may be wondering, man, you've been doing this for 4.5 years and you got 400 episodes and, maybe you've had some, I know that I've had some episodes on here I've really enjoyed. Hopefully you have. But I just want to kind of share with you why we are deciding to close this chapter. And really the reason that we're bringing this show to a close is I personally am in a chapter of my life where I am finding a new direction, I guess you could say, right? Opening up space for other things to come into my life. And although I have loved this podcast and hanging out with you on this show, and it's been, again, one of the biggest gifts and blessings in my life to be able to pour into you through this show, I am really just in a season of my life where I believe I need to open up some space for whatever is next to come in, right? And a quote that's kind of popped throughout my head the last few days as we've been approaching the last few episodes is a quote, and it's that you can do everything you want in life. You just can't do it all at once. And I think as I look to, make more impact, as I look to continue to pursue my goal of making a difference in this world, that is something that I am absolutely not going to stop, right? It's in my heart, it's in my soul, it's in my cells to make a difference, right? To make an impact, to help people in some way, shape, or form. And so this is by no means a goodbye. This is just a matter of saying, hey, it's time for the podcast to come to a close so that we can open up some space for some other things that are going to come, right? So I promise this will not be the last time we hang out, whether that's virtually, whether that's through a mic, whether that's, maybe even hanging out in person. This is not the last time that we will engage and interact, but this is, again, a moment of saying, all right, it's time to close this door and let another door open. And I truly believe it in my heart. I've spent, trust me, a lot of time thinking about this, a lot of time debating this decision, a lot of time wondering if this is the right thing or the wrong thing. And after spending a lot of time on it, you've heard me talk about this show, that it's important to listen to your intuition. I truly feel in my heart of hearts that it is right to stop this show, at least for now, and open up some space for something new to come in. So I want to say one more time, thank you so much for joining us on the show. And one last thing I'll share is if you're looking to start a podcast, I want to give you a 60-second plan to start the podcast. Right? If you've been thinking about it, this is your sign. And the real simple first step, and I know this sounds simple, is start. Stop making excuses about you don't have this or you don't have that or, X, Y, Z, that you're too busy. I mean, if you've been thinking about it, you really want to do it, my biggest tip is start. There's a few things you need to do. Number one, go on Amazon, order a mic. You want a cheap mic, get an ATR 2100. Real simple. It's about $70, right? Next, what you can do is book 3 guests. So send emails out to people and say, hey, I'm starting this podcast. I'd love to have you as one of our first guests on our show. Find a time that works, and boom, book your first 3 guests. That's the most important thing. Then once you get that and once you record those, get a membership at a hosting platform. We use Libsyn. You can also go to Buzzsprout or some other ones if you want to Google a few more. Libsyn's worked great for us. And then all you do is you're going to go through the process of, once you record those, uploading them to Libsyn and making them live. All right. Those are a first few steps you can start on. All right. If you need an editor for now and you can't do it yourself, go on Fiverr. And if you have any other questions that come up, reach out to me. Send me a message. Again, this is not goodbye. This is just a goodbye on this show for now. So if you have other questions or you want to start a podcast or you have questions on how you could do that, reach out to me and I'm totally happy to help you do that. But the biggest thing and the most important thing is you have to just start. All right. So other than that, that is everything that we have for this episode. I said it before. I said it probably a dozen times throughout today's episode. I'm going to say it again. But from my heart to yours, one last time, I want to say thank you so much for hanging out with us on this show. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for your willingness to be coachable and allow me to pour into your life. I have enjoyed this journey that we've had together so tremendously. And I hope you've received some value from it. I hope you've gotten something from it. I hope, as always, like we talk about on the show, hopefully you've taken some action from some of the things you've learned, because that's, again, where everything in your life changes, is when you actually take action. But whether you've been a part of all of this journey or any of this journey, I am forever grateful and thankful to have connected with you, to have poured into your life, and to have been a part in even just the smallest way of your journey. So I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. From my heart to yours, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm so grateful for you. And if you want to stay connected, feel free to connect with me on Instagram. It's just Stu Massengill. Or if you want to send an email, my email is just Stu, S-T-U, at stumassengill.com. So feel free to send me an email if you want to connect or have a further conversation. I truly mean this when I say this, but if I can do anything to support you, whether that's today, whether that's in a week, whether that's in a month, whether that's in 10 years, please feel free to reach out. I believe it is my calling on this planet to make a difference in others' lives. So if I can do anything to support you in the future, do not be a stranger. All right, my friend, I love you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. I hope you have a wonderful, outstanding, incredible rest of your day. And I will talk to you somewhere else in the world. I love you, my friend. Take care.